Hi, in this video, we're going to start our discussion about DHCPv6. And let's start with the router advertisement and DHCPv6. Okay, so here it's showing the different ways that we can obtain an address dynamically or automatically in IPv6. And as you can see under dynamic, we have stateless and stateful, and we'll explain that in a moment. So we're going to focus on DHCPv6. So previously we talked about SLAC, stateless address auto configuration. So we'll get back to that as well because we talked about SLAC and stateless DHCPv6. We'll talk about stateful DHCPv6, and I'll give an introduction to DHCPv6 with prefix delegation. Okay, in IPv4, life is just kind of one way. We just, on the client, we say obtain an IP address automatically. The address that means DHCP in IPv4. And the client will look for a DHCP server, and the server will allocate a IPv4 address information, including an address, subnet mask, default gateway address, DNS server address. And this is a stateful DHCP server. What that means is the server is maintaining state, knowing which clients are receiving or getting allocated which IPv4 addresses. Okay. And in this case, this is the information that the client received. Excuse me. So it all begins with a router advertisement, ICMP v6 router advertisement message in IPv6. This is going to suggest to end devices how to receive their information automatically. It's sent periodically by a IPv6 router every 200 seconds, Cisco iOS, or when a device sends a router solicitation message saying, hey, any IPv6 routers out there, send me a router advertisement message. Okay? And that router advertisement message is sent as a multicast to all IPv6 devices, even when it's requested by a router solicitation message. Just a side note that you can send these as unicasts when there's a router solicitation message. That's useful in a wireless environment. Wireless devices aren't constantly having to wake up to receive these multicast messages. Okay, but as you can see, in some cases, like we saw with SLAC, DHCP server may not even be needed. Okay, so the IPv6 unicast routing command is what makes a router an IPv6 router, and that means it will send out router advertisement messages. And we know that there's three methods, I'll remind you that there are three methods. And previously we saw SLAC in the previous chapter, stateless address auto configuration, where there is no DHCP server involved. Okay. The first two methods do involve SLAC. Let me kind of back up here. The first two methods do involve SLAC, stateless address auto configuration, meaning the device, the client, will create its own IPv6 global unicast address. Method 3 is stateful address auto configuration, similar to a DHCP server for IPv4. The server will maintain state of who is allocated which addresses. So we're going to look at method 2 and method 3 because they both involve DHCP in this series of videos. So we've seen this before when we looked at SLAC, but there are three flags that are associated with the router advertisement. Okay. So the first method, SLAC, we have the A flag. So let's take a look at these flags. The A flag, or address auto configuration flag, when set to 1, this suggests to the host to create its own global unicast address. So you can see that flag is on by default. It's method 1 SLAC only. that's on. It's also used with Slack and stateless DHCPv6. Now we'll notice that we need to set it to off typically when we want to use stateful DHCPv6, because we want the hosts typically to only receive an IPv6 address from a stateful DHCPv6 server. The O flag is off by default, but we're going to see we will turn that on when we want stateless DHCPv6. And the M flag is off by default, but we'll want to turn that on when we want the end devices hosts to use stateful DHCPv6. So the router advertisement message will suggest which of these options. In method 1, the A flag is set to on. This is the default. The other flag's to 0. Method 2 that we'll be taking a look at, we see that we'll change the O flag to 1. And the method 3, stateful DHCPv6, we'll want to change the M flag to 1. When we do that, the O flag will be ignored. And we should change the A flag from 1 to 0. We'll talk about that. But these are the two methods we're going to be focusing on in this set of videos. Okay, I've mentioned the A flag. Okay, yeah, so I'll talk more about that in the upcoming video. I've got a lot of slides on this, I know. But we'll want to change that from, I got these kind of reversed here, but that's okay. We'll change it from 1 to 0. That way, a device such as a Windows client, if it sees the M flag set to 1, it will use a stateful DHCPv6 server. But if it also sees the A flag set to 1, it will create another IPv6 address using Slack. So we'll actually have 2 global unicast addresses that it will use. So we'll typically want to change that to a 0 so it doesn't use Slack. Okay, but we'll talk about that when we get to stateful DHCPv6. Okay, so obtaining an IPv6 address automatically. Okay, in Windows, we just click on obtain an IPv6 address automatically. For Mac, I think it's interesting that with IPv4, we see using DHCP, but on IPv6, it doesn't say that, right? It says automatically, because DHCP by default isn't even involved. This here is just showing the series of messages that are associated with DHCPv6. We see the router solicitation message, let's say, and here's the router advertisement. Okay. Then we have really 4 DHCP messages. So if DHCP is involved, the client will send out a solicit message. This is similar to DORA in IPv4. So remember in DHCP for IPv4, we have the DHCP discover message, yeah. Then the DHCP offer, the request, and the acknowledgement. So these are very similar, but a solicit message, okay, which would be similar to the discover message. Then the advertise message, which would be similar to the offer message. This says, I've got the IPv6 addressing information you need. Then we have either request or information request, and that depends on whether it's stateful or stateless DHCPv6. Okay, but we'll just put R for request here as well, is sent, and then a reply. So it's basically, I'm looking for a DHCPv6 server. I'm one, and this is the information I'm offering. The request is, hey, I'll take that information. Thank you very much. And the reply is, I've got you noted. That is all yours. I'm acknowledging that that information is yours. And then similar to IPv4 DHCP, we have a renew, excuse me, where it can renew the lease. And this is an acknowledgement, the reply saying, yes, the lease is yours. And it can then accept or. It can, if the reply says yes or no, and then it renews the lease. Or it can actually release it if it doesn't want it anymore. All right. I do want to talk a little bit about an option called the rapid commit option. So again, here we have the router solicitation, router advertisement message. The client can say, hey, you know, I can do rapid commit. Can you do rapid commit? And the DHCP server will reply, if it can, yes, I can do it. So what is the rapid commit option? The rapid commit option, instead of 4 messages, like we saw just previously, it can shorten it to 2 messages. So if both ends can do it, here we see the client saying, hey, I would like to shorten this exchange. Let's just do all this in 2 messages. Why go back and forth 4 times? I want it. If you send it to me, that'll be good enough. So that's the rapid commit option, saying, hey, are you willing to, are you willing to do this in 2 messages and send me the information? And if the server replies with the rapid commit option set, says, yeah, here's all your address, here's the address and information that I'm giving you as part of my stateful or stateless service, either one. And that's all that's needed here. We don't need to talk any further. It's all yours. Okay, and actually we can verify this. We'll talk more about how to configure a DHCP server in a moment, but on a router. But here on the interface, this is where we give it the rapid commit, saying if the router is acting as a DHCP server, I'm going to be talking about that more later, this is where we can do the rapid commit on the interface. And we can see when we do this show IPv6 DHCP interface command that it shows that it is enabled. We'll talk more about how to configure a DHCP server, a router as a DHCP server in upcoming videos here. And this is just showing, again, the running config. This here is actually showing us that the router has been configured as a stateless DHCPv6 server, and here it has the rapid commit option on its gig00 interface. We'll take a look at this config in much more detail in upcoming videos. Okay, so that's the router advertisement and DHCPv6. More coming on stateless and stateful and prefix delegation.